I'm your host, Micah Versman, and on today's new episode of the Producer Podcast, I'm excited to be sitting down with producer Daryl Lefever. Daryl comes with a wealth of knowledge on both the producing and accounting sides of the industry, with credits on films like The Polar Express, I Can Only Imagine, Unplanned, and the upcoming The Best Christmas Pageant Ever. So without further ado, let's get started. Welcome to the Producer Podcast, Daryl.
Why, thank you. Thanks, Micah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I was excited this worked out when me and Josh were talking this last time, and he mentioned you as somebody that would be a good person to talk to on the show. That
Yeah, Josh is great. I've known Josh for over 10 years. We worked together on a bunch of stuff. So, yeah, great guy.
nice. So I don't know much about you other than you have backgrounds in both producing and accounting. So maybe to start, just share more about how you even got started in the film industry and what drew you to it.
Yeah, no, I was 26 years old when I got started and didn't have any experience in film at all. My wife was pregnant with our first son when I first started even thinking about it. And it really all happened because I really didn't like my job. I was working as a general manager at a trucking company, and just wasn't feeling like this is what I wanted to do with my life. And a friend of mine said, "What would you do if you could do anything?" And I said, "Well, I'd make movies. Who wouldn't?" And he said, "Why don't you?" So my only context really for getting into film was I had a friend that was studying film at Regent University down in Virginia Beach, and I lived in Pennsylvania at the time. And I just decided, okay, so here we go, and took our savings, what little bit we had, and went down to Virginia Beach and interned on student films for the summer. Did 3 student films as a grip electric, and just learned whatever I could. I loved it. I was like, I'm hooked. This is what I'm doing the rest of my life. That was 31 years ago. And so, yeah, so it's kind of stuck. And From there, got on Universal Studios. Back then, we called it a mini series that was shooting there, and got on that and made a bunch of friends, and then moved to LA, because back then you really did have to move to LA if you wanted to. This
Okay.
is in the early 90s, or like 93, 94. So there really wasn't a film industry outside of Los Angeles then. Now I
Mhm.
would recommend, depending on what you want to do, like there's really no reason to move to Los Angeles. Just a lot more competition. But because stuff is filmed obviously all over the country now and all over the world. So moved out there, made friends, and started off as an office PA. And then really the way I got into accounting, I had done accounting with my dad. My dad was a CFO
Okay.
of a corporation. And so even just out of high school, like I would go in, and even before that, actually, I did accounting stuff just from early on. Not because I had a passion for it, but just because it was something that my dad did. Before that, my dad was a banker.
Hmm.
So I was just always around debits and credits and how money works and whatnot. And So anyway, so when I was an office PA, working on one of these mini series for NBC, I just kept seeing all these accountants that would come in like 2 hours after I'd already been there and leave like an hour or two before I was going to leave. And somehow they were doing like 10-hour days and I was doing 14-hour days. And I was like, this seems like a better idea. I know how to do this. So maybe this is an option. So I went into the accountant towards the end and said, "Hey, I have an experience in this. I think I could do this." Because when I left for Los Angeles, it didn't even occur to me that there were accountants on movies. Like it just
Hmm.
wasn't even though I'd done accounting, like it wasn't the reason I moved there. I had no interest in it. But when I saw it, and being a dad, and a husband and all that, I was like, maybe this is something I should do for a little while, until the kids get older. Maybe this will work, because I like being home, for dinner and putting my kids to bed and being there in the morning and all that. So I thought this might be a good option as something I can do and still stay in the industry for a while. So that's what I did. So this accountant on this little mini series, she took me under her wing and showed me how cost reports work and all that. And so on Friday, as the movie was wrapping up, I was an office PA, and then on Monday morning, I was the post accountant. I was the accountant on it for the next whatever 4 months as the film worked it, or the miniseries worked its way through post. So so yeah, that's kind of how I got in, and just kept working my way up through accountant. I was after that, then I was a second assistant accountant on a giant uh, movie. It was called Up Close and Personal, which was
Okay.
back a long ways, but it was Robert Redford, Michelle Pfeiffer. Um, so directed by John Avnet, and that was my first feature. And I was a second assistant on that, and then just kept, yeah, I was second assistant for a while, and then a first assistant accountant, and then an accountant, and did that for 14 years. Um, and ended up working on huge movies, mostly at Warner Brothers. I did like Polar Express and Where the Wild Things Are, and X-Men, and That Thing You Do, and just, yeah, Nancy Drew, just a whole bunch of giant films uh, as an accountant. And I did like it. It was fine, but was never the reason I got in the industry. I didn't get
Mm-hmm.
in the industry to be an accountant. I get in the industry because I wanted to produce awesome films, and but it was a good learning ground. I learned a ton doing that because ultimately everything comes down to money, right?
Oh, yes.
So just really learned how to run scenarios, and how much overtime cost, and rigging teams and construction, and just all the different things that go into how much it costs to budget a film and to make a film, and additional days and adding to the schedule and all that kind of stuff. It was what I did. So it ended up being super helpful, in producing, to have that background. But I was happy to leave it behind, and start producing. And like in 2008, I think, was when I kind of started to transition. And the first few films I did with Kevin Downs, who's one of the founders here at Kingdom Story Company. We started together in 2008, and I would do a film for him, but they were really, really small, like
Mm-hmm.
$700,000 budgets all in. And I would do a movie with him, and then I'd have to go back to the studio and do like a accounting gig to make enough money again to go back and do another little one, because the movies were so small, I just couldn't pay much. And but then after a while, then we did Mom's Night Out, was the first film that we did that was big enough that I could be a producer on it and actually get paid enough to live, to actually make a living at. And that was like a $5 million movie, and we did that, and it went well, and then we just kept going. So yeah, ever since that, I've been full-time producing for the last like I say, like 14 years or so. So yeah, it was good. So that's the history in a nutshell.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's cool. Starting just by talking a little bit more on like the accounting aspect and that part of your career, maybe just break down a little bit more what all do production accountants do? Because I know me getting started like as an indie producer, it's like you actually are like doing all this accounting stuff, and then you realize, oh, there's a whole department that helps with all these things.
Yeah. Yeah. The biggest accounting department I ever had was I think on X-Men we had 14 people in
Okay.
accounting. So yeah, so it can definitely grow. And if you have shows that have multiple locations, then you can have
Hmm.
lots more, because you can need at least a key, a first, and a payroll person at each location. So
Yeah.
like a Mission Impossible type movie, I mean, they might end up with 30 some people in an accounting department over the course of the filming, because of all the different, and then have visual effects accountants and post accountants and all kinds of things. Because yeah, it's a lot to process. Yeah, I mean, the kind of the beginnings things that an accountant does on a film is get you set up with a payroll company, right? I mean, that's
Hmm.
right away. You got to get people paid. So you got to, and then that determines what kind of software you're going to use. Like if you're going to go with Cast and Crew or EP, or one of the other ones, Green Slate or whatever. Um, and then each one of those has their own proprietary software that they use to help you track the costs, and to integrate with the payroll, so that when you ingest the invoice, and everything comes over with all the names and how much they make and stuff, and the fringes and all that. So So that's kind of one of the first things you have to do. And you have to build a budget. So usually a budget kind of already exists in some form,
Mm-hmm.
but when the accountant gets it, then they need to really check all the fringes and make sure all the rates are correct, make sure there's no mistakes in the budget because budgets can be 200 pages long, so there's plenty of opportunity for some little error or something. Um, and then the other thing they need to do right away in the beginning is understand the rebates. And almost every movie nowadays is shot in some kind of state or country with some incentive program.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to figure out how to tag the local labor versus the non-resident labor versus local spend, and sometimes there's all kind of uplifts. So it can be really complicated actually, uh, with the different kinds of incentives because each state's just a little bit different. So then you have to start going through and to really get in the budget solid. So those are the first two things, and then the studio is going to want a cash flow. So you got to build a cash flow so that they can determine how much. So if let's say you're spending $10 million over a 30-week period or whatever, how much
Mm-hmm.
you need that first week, how much you need the second week, and then during the shoot weeks, how much you need, because they want to know for their own purposes, like how much cash, because you don't just get, if it's a $10 million movie, they're not just going to give you $10 million and say, let us know when you're done. They sparse it out over the whole period, all the way through post.
Okay.
So you get so much per week, and then when you're shooting, you need more each week, obviously, because that's your most expensive weeks. And it goes back down again over post. So yeah, the cash flow is a big part of it, and you have to have your budget before you can do the cash flow. So once you get your budget locked in, then you can kind of, or at least close, then you
Mm-hmm.
can figure out how to do that. And yeah, then you got to get set up with all the different unions. So DGA and IA and sometimes Writers Guild, but usually that's already done. Um, Teamsters. So the line producer will do the deal, but you still got to make sure that the payroll company has the information to do the
Okay.
right fringes and where to send it all. And then it comes time to just start tracking it all, tracking both for the incentive and tracking against the budget. So then you got to keep everything current as possible. My motto was always today's mail today. Now things don't come by they come more by email than by postal mail, obviously. But
Mm-hmm.
it's like whatever comes in today, we got to process it today because if you get behind at all, it just snowballs because the
Yes.
volume is so intense. Um, so yeah, it's just keeping everything current and then track it in the cost report. So cost report has the budget for each account. So you might have, like our last film, the cost report was like 32 pages long because there's so many different accounts you're tracking things against.
Mm-hmm.
And every cost gets coded into a specific account, and then you track that against what you budgeted for the whole movie. And so each, like an easy example would just be like take the key grip or something. So if you budgeted X amount of weeks of prep and X amount per week for his shooting weeks, right? And that comes up to a total, then each week you got to make sure, like, is there enough money left in his account to get him through to the end? So that's the estimating part of the job, which is really the kind of the more interesting part of the job. Is just tracking all those costs to make sure that you're not going to go over before you get to the end of the movie. So, but then there's also all the legal stuff too, like 1099s and payroll and all the boring stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just like keeping track of all those kind of real world accounting things, which is a lot different. It doesn't production accounting is I mean, there's obviously things in real world accounting that apply. And people get paid and people you have to issue 1099s and you have to do accounts payable and all that kind of thing. But production accounting is a lot different in that it's most of the job is about estimating. It's about this is how much money we have to spend. Do we have enough to get through to the end? And then also besides like the tracking of it, but it's also the tracking of the rebate of everything and making sure that's going to be as big as you think it's going to be, the incentive, so the money that you're going to get back. Um, and yeah, and it's just that you're spending a lot of money in a very short period of time. Like in normal corporate accounting, like you're budgeting for a year, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you have X amount of money over the course of a year, and you have money coming in, and you're estimating it out. But in production accounting for films, like you get X amount of money, and you're going to spend like 80% of that money in a 6 week period or something, depending on how many shooting days you have. But like all that money goes out, so it goes super fast.
Yes.
So you're just spending, easily on a bigger film, you're spending 150 to $200,000 a day. So it just money's just going out so fast. You just got to keep track of it, really, really on top of it. So, um, which is again, even if you're had a huge corporation and you were spending that much per day, on a
Hmm.
decent size, not huge, not like an Amazon, but like a decent sized company, it's still very regular. So you kind of have
Right.
systems in place and you're all that. Whereas this like just hits all of a sudden, you're like spending so much money so quickly. Um, so, uh, so yeah, that's kind of the beginning to end of production accounting. And then within the department, you have the accountant who's mostly responsible for approvals and the budget and cost reporting. And then you have the first assistant who's responsible for overseeing accounts payable and the credit cards um, and the rest of the department. And then you have payroll, who's responsible for obviously getting everybody paid. And then you might have a separate person doing extras payroll. And sometimes you might even have an even separate person doing just SAG payroll for the actors. So some bigger shows you might have three payroll accountants on just to keep it all going. Um, so and you might have in accounts payable, you might have, you know, two or three or even more people. If it's a big show, it could have multiple people. Um, just keeping the accounts payable going for each department, just so they can keep on top of, especially construction. A lot of times if it's a big build,
Hmm.
they'll have their own accountant just inside construction because they have the biggest budget a lot of times. um,
Yeah.
so might have somebody that's just doing payroll and accounts payable just for construction. Yeah,
That's a lot.
yeah, it is a
Um,
lot.
so I guess like one question I have there is like how much do like the people in the accounting department like interact with the producer? Is there like a lot of back and forth, or is it more the producers just like seeing the reports that they're generating?
So I'm a little different because it is my background. So I tend to talk
Hmm.
to each person in accounting at some level. I
Yeah.
mean, I'll go in and talk to the payroll person, and I'll go in and talk to the first assistant just because I know the job. I mean, I haven't
Right.
done it recently, but I still have to understand the basic, knowledge of it all. So there's a lot of questions I'll have that I'll just go straight to them, just ask them. But typically, probably a normal producer accounting relationship, it would be more just with the key accountant,
Okay.
because they got to talk every week, at least once a week, usually more than that. They got to talk every week to for their cost report, just to go down through it and
Hmm.
make sure everything's working and staying on track. And there's going to be questions that uh, the accountant should be asking about, certain hires, or the accountant should be making the producer aware if there looks like there's a trouble in a certain area, like we're gone over in a certain area.
So then does like the producer mainly just kind of hire that key accountant and then they build out like the rest of the accounting team, or how
Yeah,
does
it's
that usually work?
Yeah, hiring of the accounting team is pretty much the same as any other department. Like, producer would probably would hire the DP, and then
Hmm.
together with the DP, hire a key grip and a gaffer, right? And then they're going to hire their best boys and,
Hmm.
thirds and dollies and all that kind of stuff, rigging, right? They're going to hire their own crew. So yeah, I would probably be involved in the accountant for sure, and then maybe the first into payroll. Depends on if they already have somebody that they work with a lot and have a relationship with, like a trust, and
Hmm.
feel confident with that person, then that's fine. I'm not going to interfere in that. If they don't have somebody, then I might help with people that I've worked before that I think are really talented, um, especially with payroll, because there's so many rules. I mean, every union has their own rules, and they're very, very just complicated. Just paying SAG alone, paying the actors alone is its own kind of beast. Um, and then the Teamsters are different from the IA, and even the sound department can be different from the rest of the IA. And makeup and hair, if they're on the East Coast, are different than the West
Hmm.
Coast and from the rest of the country. And yeah, it just kind of goes on. And there's DGA, and yeah, it just goes on and on and on. So everybody's got little things that are unique about them. Or if you hire somebody, from out of town, then they're paid differently, especially if they're from LA and you're not shooting in LA. So yeah, it's there's just so much that goes on with payroll, that you really want to have a good payroll accountant.
Yeah, that's for sure. Um, I guess one other question, kind of on the accounting side, I'd have for you, just since you have a background in it, is like if there are people listening that are like, oh, I'm kind of interested in getting into the accounting side of things, like what's the best way to go about it? Because most people are like, what they teach in like colleges for accounting isn't actually film accounting.
No, it is a lot different for sure. That's why I say when I say real world accounting, that's just there's things that carry over for sure. I mean, debits and
Hmm.
credits and accounts payable and stuff like that. It's all the same, but the volume and the speed at which you move and the things that are the priority are a little different in production accounting. Um, to me, the best thing to do, because look, production accounting teams are always looking to hire locals whenever they can. So if you live somewhere, wherever, obviously Atlanta, or, um, even Oklahoma, New Mexico, New Orleans, I mean, places where they shoot a lot of films.
Hmm.
Um, you can always just go. Usually, you can go to the state film incentive website and find out what films are coming. Because when there's definitely ways to find out, because when I am about to leave to go somewhere, I get just tons and tons of emails about film coming into town, and so many people send me their resumes and stuff for every department, not just accounting, but like every department. You get tons of stuff. So
Hmm.
there's definitely ways to find out when a film is coming. And there's even websites for crew, just specifically to postings and stuff that happen, just for people to be able to know where to send their resume. But because so many people are looking to be on set, because again, same when I got into film, I wasn't looking to be in accounting. Um, I was looking to be on set and work with, be wherever the camera is, and but
Hmm.
because there's such a need for it, and not as many people are looking to get into that. You can, if you have any kind of an accounting experience, you can probably get in as like a junior second assistant, or at least a clerk. Um, but if you have any kind of, if you've done anything, you might even be able to get a second assistant gig. So as a local, so that's really the best way, is just go in, because a second assistant is really just doing accounts payable,
Okay.
putting purchase orders to that, which is like the approval process. Gets everything approved before the actual invoice comes in. The
Hmm.
department head's supposed to do a purchase order, and you get those approved, and then you input those into the system, and then you get the invoice in, and you uh, match it up to the PO and get it approved and get it paid. There's always a need, because it's just not as many people looking to do the job as there are that are needed usually. Um,
Right.
yeah, it's definitely, and the nice thing about accounting, like I say, the reason I got into it in the first place is because you're always in either an air conditioned or heated room, right? Like you're not out in the cold, or in the heat. It's pretty much the same hours every day.
Okay.
You're not working any overnights. It's like because if the crew, if it's exterior night shot, then you're working all night, right? So
Hmm.
accounting doesn't work. The call sheet accounting works like daytime hours only.
Okay.
So it's a little bit nicer that way. You can get normal hours, so you can have a life, and especially if you have a family or something, and you don't want to be stuck working overnights and stuff. So it's not a bad gig, and if you can get into it, you can get all the same benefits. Like if you can work your way up as a second assistant or first assistant, you can get health insurance and pension, all that through the union. So it's certainly not a bad way to go. It's not as you do feel a little bit removed from the crew sometimes, because you're not a part of what's happening on set and
Yeah.
all that. But I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily always a bad thing either. Uh, because the set can be either really, really fun, or it can be really, really miserable. So
Uh-huh.
last film I did, it was over 100 degrees a lot of day, and we were shooting where there were snakes and ticks and all kinds of things. So,
Oh.
so it wasn't exactly a fun experience. So So yeah, there were days I was like, oh, accounting didn't seem so bad right now. But yeah, so yeah, if you have a proclivity towards that at all, I mean, not everybody's good with numbers, not everybody's good with
Hmm.
and now everything's digital, right? So
Right.
you have to be pretty good with your because you got to scan everything and label it and file it, and it's all digitally filed and stuff. Um, so you definitely have to be good at that sort of thing, or competent anyway. Um, so with softwares and stuff, but it's not rocket science.
Mhm.
Yeah. So and you definitely don't need a college degree to get into production accounting. Um, in fact, I still don't have a college degree. 31 years in, I don't have one college credit to my name. So yeah, so it it can be a good option for some people. In fact,
Mhm.
my nephew got into it. My nephew, oddly enough, went to Full Sail Film School
Okay.
and graduated, and because he always wanted to do what Uncle Daryl does, right? Like work in movies. And he got out, and after he graduated, I got him a job on a Warner Brothers movie as a clerk. And I said, look, you can do this, but watch every department. Go out to set. I'll give you opportunities to take things out to set for signature, or take paychecks out to set, and really talk to different department heads and figure out what it is that you really want to do.
Hmm.
And then you can get out of accounting and go do that. Well, that was 15 years ago, and now he's an accountant for Netflix. So,
Wow.
yeah, so I sort of thought he would want to get out, but he started doing it, and he actually really liked it. He was like, "This is great." He was just got married. He had just his that on that film, actually, on that first movie. He went away and got married and had a little honeymoon and came back during filming. So yeah, he just enjoyed it so much. He's like, oh, this is great. Why would I do anything else? So he's now he's got 3 kids, and
Hmm.
works for Netflix. So uh, yeah, so good for him.
That's awesome. Oh, so then turning kind of towards your producer experience, because that I know is where you said you always wanted to kind of end up. Like, my first question would be, what type of producer, what producer role do you normally fill? Because there's so
There's
many
so
different
many,
types.
yeah, so many different types. So yeah, I'm slowly transitioning out of it, but I've been a line producer type for the last, like I say, 14 years or so. I'm transitioning out of that a little bit more to just straight up producing, because now I'm full
Hmm.
time with Kingdom Story Company here, and we'll have kind of back to back films sometimes. So I can't just be line producing all the time. But I think I'll probably always, just because that's my background, especially with the finance side, I'll always have some kind of role in that. I'll probably always sit in the cost report meetings, even if I'm not, because like on this last movie, actually the last 3 or 4 movies, somebody else was the line producer.
Okay.
But even still, as a producer, I'm still acting in that role. I'm still going in and talking with the accountant, sitting through the cost report meetings, and trying to eyeball stuff and take a quick look at it and make sure each account looks like it's going to be okay, and all that. So yeah, it's something that I'll probably always be a part of. But yeah,
Hmm.
but I'm not the kind of producer. People ask me all the time, what does a producer do? And I'm like, there's some producers that are attached to things,
Hmm.
and therefore producers because they own the IP, or they're attached to a cast member, or they're attached to money that funds it, or they're whatever, they're attached to things. And then there's producers that are kind of the big picture, like have the relationship with the studio, or the distributor, um, or again have the relationship with the producer that was attached to the IP or the script or the book or whatever. Um, and none of that is what I do. I'm the guy on the ground at 4 a.m. When crew calls 5, and making sure that the gates open and everything's ready to go, and we have the equipment, we have the crew, and we whatever, that everything's good. So yeah, it's
Hmm.
really kind of a giant project manager is what that producing role is. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Oh, so then with you kind of being more that like project manager, uh, producer, I'd be curious to hear. just as a producer, especially, how are you like, because the technology these last few years has been like constantly changing. So how are you kind of like trying to keep up with that, or what ways have you found that have been worked well for you to kind of keep your finger on that so that when different crew members come to you like wanting something or asking about something, you know enough of it that you can make good decisions.
Yeah, I think the biggest, because we haven't gotten into any kind of AI stuff yet, right? So we're still,
Okay.
we're shooting. Uh, it's all live action, and it's everything we do is so far anyway is live action, and it's shooting on real sets with real actors and doing that. I did work on Polar Express, but that was a long time ago. That was over 20 years ago, and that was the only real animated kind of thing I ever worked
Hmm.
on. It was motion capture. But so in our world, really, the only thing that changes is lighting's changed. With more LED lights and stuff,
Hmm.
which is great because it's just lighter and easier to carry and move and change color temperature and dim without having to make it really difficult. I mean, so lighting is great. That is continues to change. I mean, cameras have changed, but once you went from film to digital, it just keeps refining, right? I mean, it just keeps
Yeah.
getting better and better. But and it's funny that the cameras that we thought were even shoot even 7 years ago that were state of the art, right? Or now like you wouldn't use them,
Uh-huh.
So yeah, that's kind of amazing. But so the other side of it that's changed though is so on set hasn't changed that much. You still use cranes, you still use dollies and dolly track, you still have a camera, you still have the focus puller, you still have some lenses we use are over 20 years old, or sometimes 30 years old, because the good ones are the old ones.
Right.
So those haven't changed. Um, like I say, the lighting, the equipment for the light has changed, but the lighting itself hasn't changed, right? You're still lighting in a similar way. It's just the light itself may have changed. Grip equipment is not changed that much, right? It's
Hmm.
different grids and frames and C stands and whatnot. So I think the biggest area of change is post. Like that's what
Okay.
just keeps changing. And so I have a really great post supervisor here, and she keeps up on it. We have two other people here at the company that are more on the technical side. The one is a colorist, so he can do our DIs and stuff and outputs. The other one keeps track of all of our files and knows how to get what the editors need and the visual effects, what pulls that visual effects needs, and then how to, it's just that's the side that I have a great basic understanding of sound and color and outputs and just the edit itself, but it changes so quickly all the time that I don't even try. Like
Hmm.
I just stay like I understand the pipeline, and I understand the calendar, and I understand that you know we got to get the composer to be finished and the music back before we can go on the dubbing stage, and we got to get like I get all those things that just logically make sense, but all the initials and acronyms we joke about it all the time. Like they'll start talking about stuff and I'll just start teasing them about the different letters, all the different stuff that they need to do that. And I'm just like, I have no idea what you're even talking about. Like, and we just talk
Uh-huh.
about things in very broad terms. Because it seems to change just all the time. And I remember the very first film that we did at Warner Brothers that we did a DI on. So it's that wasn't actually just film,
Hmm.
because we used to make like an answer print, right? And you created your prints off of the intermediate, and somebody said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to ingest it all, and then we're going to make everything digitally. And I was just like, at first the whole point was it was going to be so much cheaper. You're going to save all this money. It's kind of like even going from film to digital. It's like, oh, it's going to be so much cheaper because now you don't have to develop film anymore, right? You don't have to buy the film, and you don't have to develop it, and you don't have to print it. It's like, well, yeah, except that now I need a DUT and a DIT, and I need to rent his package. You know what I mean? It's like I didn't really save any money. I was kind of told I was going to save money, but I didn't actually
Hmm.
save any money. Yes, it's faster and easier, and you don't have to wait for dailies, and you can watch things live, and you can color grade live on set, and you can, whatever. Like it's great. Like I wouldn't go back to film necessarily, unless it was a specific film that should be on film. But so I'm not saying that we shouldn't have made the switch to digital, but it's just like it didn't really save money. It saved time, and it makes things more convenient. And in some ways, it's probably safer because you're not worried about overexposing the film or physically losing the film, or something happening to it or whatever.
Yeah.
Especially when you used to have to. My very first paid job in industry, I'll digress here a little bit. My very first paid job in industry was I was a minivan driver, and I was the film runner. So literally, when we shot on film, I would take the big cases of film to the airport every day to have it shipped to Los Angeles because we were shooting in Virginia. On this miniseries, we'd have it shipped to Los Angeles to be developed, and then they would make the prints. And then the next day, I'd go to the airport in the morning and pick up the prints from the day before, take them back so that the director and producers could watch dailies, and then take the film from that day's shooting, that current day's shooting, back to the airport to be shipped out again, counter to counter on United or Delta Dash or whatever, and then the next morning get that day's prints and just keep doing that. So I did that every day for like 6 months,
Wow.
as I took the film to the airport. So if you think about how scary that is, right? Like you're literally that whole day shooting is now in a box that's being shipped across the country. And if something happens to that box, even if it just gets cracked open, right?
Hmm.
Like your whole day is gone. Like everything you shot, you'd have to reshoot it because you've lost everything. So yes, I'm a fan of digital shooting for no other reason than just that. But there's lots of other advantages. But yeah, all that to say that sometimes these advancements aren't actually the money savings that everybody claims they're going to be. But I still think that it's all going in a positive direction.
Right. So I know you were touching on there too, how like you've been a line producer a lot and you're kind of moving away from that. But I guess one question I did have on like the kind of that line producing side is what have you learned about the compromise with creatives in terms of trying to like fulfill their vision, but also staying within or even just close to that budget?
Yeah, a big part of the job is figuring out how to build the sandbox big enough for the director to be able to play with what he wants to and put the toys in the sandbox that he wants to play with, right? But stay on budget. I mean, it's a huge part of it, and at some point, you just have to win over the director's trust
Hmm.
that look, we all want the best possible movie, right? But sometimes there are decisions that you have to make, simply because of the amount of money that you have for it, right? But it can also be just about either saving money on an aspect like a particular crane or whatever, because that money's got to come from somewhere, right? And the easiest place to take it from is time, right?
Hmm.
So if you can convince the director, look, like you can have one or the other. You can either have the big crane shot, or you can have the whole day to shoot this. Which do you want? Because if you're going to get the crane, then I need the money from somewhere. So that means we have to shoot this in 10 hours instead of 12 or whatever it is, right? Whatever the compromise
Right.
is. And sometimes it's not that simple, but that's a lot of times that's what it does come down to is that it's bartering, right? It's like,
Hmm.
look, if you want this, then this is what we have to do. This is the alternative to try to be able to afford it. And so I try to make it as win-win as much as possible, or I try to present the director with the option, like you can have this, but it means giving up this. So which is more important to you? Is it more important to have whatever the number of extras or um, the time to shoot the scene or to be able to shoot it at golden hour, like because a lot of times I want to shoot a certain time of day, right?
Yep.
So do you want to be able to get this shot at that time of day? But that means that we got to wrap as soon as the sun goes down, if that's what you want to do. So, because we can't light it, and it won't match anyway. So anyway, there's just all kinds of discussions like that, which a lot of times just comes from having done it, for years,
Hmm.
just knowing like, well, these are the parameters and these are the options. Um, so which is more important to you? That's usually what I try and go with, which is more important. Because I really never want to, as much as possible, I don't want to go with just a flat out no.
Right.
I really don't want to just, especially if it's a good idea. I mean, sometimes, believe it or not, directors have bad ideas. Um, but I mean, they're just like, that's just not a good idea. But for the most part, it's a good idea and we all want it to win. So I really don't want to go in just saying, just, no, like that we can't do that, especially if it's, a lot of times it'll be an aerial or a drone shot or whatever,
Hmm.
and it's like, well, we can do that, but this is what it's going to cost. This is what it's going to take to do it. So yeah, I try to put the ownership back on them, you know,
Yeah.
or to make the decision. Try to give them options. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess in a nutshell, that's what I would say is
Okay.
always try to give options as opposed to just no's, because nobody wants to be the no guy and nobody likes the no guy.
Hmm.
So I always try to have it be a situation where somebody can they can feel like they've won something.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Um, and so then like having some of those discussions with the director, I guess like how much of that are you maybe doing even before like some of those initial budgets are written for the project to help inform
yeah,
the
yeah, a
budgeting
lot. You
process?
try to. I mean, really, that's why I always say, you know, I mean, everybody says, movies are made in prep. Like you have to put the time in prep and really talk about everything. Talk about each day and what equipment needs are and what especially add-ons. Like camera add-ons. How many C camera days do you need? How many crane days are there, if any? Can it be done on jib instead of a crane? Can it be, whatever? Like, what are all the different things? What are there things that the grip truck is just carrying that we can get this shot done with? Does it have to be a specialty rental that gets brought in for the day? How many
Hmm.
condor days are there? How many night scenes are there? They're big and expensive, and we got to have condors to light for moonlight. Just all those conversations need to happen during prep, because once you budget it, then it's even harder to try to, if they add stuff, then that's when it's really hard. Um, and numbers of extras is huge. It seems like every time I build a schedule and I estimate how many extras we're going to need for a scene, it's never enough. Like it's always like I'm like, really? We need 100 people in this department store. Like we can't have 50 people in the department store. Like we
Hmm.
can't have 50 people crossing. It has to be 100. It's just all those things that just keep, because it really is the pennies that make the dollars on these budgets. It's like everything just starts to add up and add up and add up and add up. So, uh,
Yes.
yeah, there you have it.
I got just kind of a couple wrap-up questions here
Sure.
for you. The first one I'd love to kind of delve a little bit into, just since I know you mentioned how you were married and you're expecting your first kid when you were just getting into the industry. But like as a producer, especially, how have you kind of learned to balance that family life while still working in this industry?
I would say a lot of it was, first off, my wife is amazing. My wife is awesome, and she loves the adventure of it all, which is great. Um, she she once we're home for a while, like she's like, where are we going next? Like, what's the next thing? Like, especially if it's someplace new. If we're going back to the same old, it's not quite as exciting. But
Hmm.
if it's some new state or new country or whatever, like she's all for it. Like she thinks it's going to be awesome to get to travel and go to a new place. And it also worked that I brought my wife, and we have two kids. They're both married now, so obviously we're empty nesters. But when they were growing up, we all went. Like I didn't go to any location that I was at more than 4 weeks. Put it that way. Sometimes I would go
Okay.
somewhere for like 4 weeks, and they might not come because it was just too disruptive to try and do that for just a couple of weeks. But anywhere that I was at more than that, they would come. They came and they lived. We lived in Melbourne, Australia for 8 months. We lived in Sydney, Australia for 8 months. We did Toronto for 11 months. We did New Mexico like 4 or 5 times, with North Carolina, New Orleans. Um, Thailand. Anyway, we just went all over, and we would come along and just made a adventure out of it. And the reality was that because uh, it was just us there, like
Hmm.
as a family, like we didn't have church responsibilities, we didn't have any other family, we didn't have friend group things that we had play whatever. It was just us. So every weekend was just us together as a family, and every night that I'd get home, it would just be us. Like I didn't have a Wednesday night thing I had to be at or a Friday night thing or whatever. So we ended up having more family time actually on location than we would at home because there was no other,
Interesting.
the kids didn't have stuff either, like they didn't
Uh-huh.
have their things to go right off and do. So, so yeah, I mean, it would be different if my kids had been really, really into sports or,
Hmm.
like on a team. That would have been hard, right? Like to pull them away.
Yeah.
But they weren't, and so the stuff they were into, they could do kind of anywhere. And so yeah, we just traveled as a family and made it work. And now they look back fondly on it. They look back and go, "Oh, remember that
Hmm.
time we were in Australia? We went to the Great Barrier Reef, or remember that time? Whatever. Like just that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
They remember it really well. So yeah, I think you can make it work. I think it'd be really hard if that hadn't all worked out perfectly. Like
Hmm.
if my wife had, if she was a career woman, and she had a completely different career, and she couldn't travel with me, like that would have been really hard. That would have made it
Right.
much different kind of a situation. So I wouldn't say that our situation worked for everybody or it's always easy or whatever. But for us, it worked really well.
No, that's awesome, man. Yeah, that was definitely must have been some fun adventures. So
Yeah, no, for
I've
sure.
yet to travel outside the country, so
Okay.
that I also wanted to touch on just like social media because that's such a big thing nowadays of like as a producer, how do you use that to either promote like projects that you've worked on or even just yourself kind of in the industry?
So I'm really bad at self promotion. So I don't at all. I mean, I've been working with the same team for 16 years, so I don't
Okay.
really promote
Right.
myself that way at all. Yeah, which is good because I would stink at it if I had to. But yeah, but as a company like Kingdom Story Company, the company here, that we have not full-time employees, but like there's a group that we use called Troops and Allies, and they have movie to movie, again, not like full-time employees. They have like 24 to 26 people that they hire every time we sort of start to mount a marketing campaign for a film,
Hmm.
and they go crazy on social media and traveling and screening the film and talking to influencers and getting the influencers to come in and watch the film and then having the influencers post about it. And I mean, it's a whole beast that's not my world. Honestly, I don't get involved in it much. I will go out and do some screenings and stuff that are people that are
Hmm.
soft contacts of mine that I enjoy, just like showing the movie and everything, or churches that I have a history with or whatever, that kind of thing. But I don't. I'm on the production side. I don't get too involved in marketing, but it's definitely a big part of it. I mean, yeah, the impressions and even just our own Kingdom Story Company, Instagram and Facebook pages and stuff, and pushing stuff out. But yeah, it's definitely a huge part of the marketing of the films.
All right. Yeah. No, then honestly, that's as I've been talking to people, that seems to be the trend. Producers don't really like to self-promote
Yeah,
themselves.
yeah, no,
So
I
it's
just
it's interesting.
yeah, yeah.
So then my final question for you is for somebody who's maybe just getting started in the industry and is interested in being a producer someday, like what would be a piece of advice you would give to them?
I mean, I would probably say start off just doing. It's good. Look, there's two different ways to get in the film. There's either you work on much smaller projects, right? Like
Hmm.
local things or commercials, shorts, whatever, and you can be a producer on those really early. Like you could be 19 years old and be a producer, right? Um, and get paid to do it. If it's a small enough project and you help pull it together and everything like that. And there's nothing wrong with that avenue. Like, because then as you get to know people, then you build a reputation and you can slowly build that into doing bigger and bigger and bigger things as a producer, right? Or the flip route is the route that I did, start off as a PA and work your way up through to some kind of department head, no matter what it is. Locations is a good route to go to if you want to get into producing, because there's lots of locations managers that end up switching over to producing, just because when you manage locations, it's managing a pretty big department and you're a
Hmm.
big part of the making of the film. And it's very administrative. So yeah, so that's not a bad avenue to go. But you work on big projects. Like I thought it was normal that my first feature was, a giant Disney movie, like I thought that was what
Right.
people did, so yeah, so that there's that avenue as well. So I don't know that there's really a way to go. It probably depends on where you live and what your
Hmm.
contacts are and your kind of soft contacts and what you want to do. But I would say one or the other, either just trying to get on whatever is happening wherever you live and work your way on to just producing smaller stuff. Uh, yeah, or just be happy to be an office PA on a big giant movie and get in and watch what everybody does and see what department you really want to pursue. And because there really is no roadmap, you know,
Hmm.
um, that I would think of, because there's no training program to be a producer. It's not like the DGA, right? You can go in and you can do
Hmm.
your set PA days and and then get into the DJ, qualify to get in the DGA as a second assistant or something, and then you go through training and you work way up to, if you have too many days to be a second assistant, and then a first or UPM. If you want to do that, but yeah, but producer, there really isn't any plan.
Yeah,
So
that's for sure. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode of the Producer Podcast. But thank you again, Daryl, for taking the time to come on today.
you bet. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Producer Podcast. Want to learn more great insights on the world of producing? Then pick up your copy of The Producer's Life, a practical guide to film producing, available now. Until next time, make sure to subscribe to the Producer Podcast, and thanks for listening.